Okay, well, welcome to the seventh in the class, and we're going to continue with Aaron next week. And I'll see you on Saturday morning. I'll be leading the discussion of Emor.
I am Aaron.
Let's start with the bracha for study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshana b'mitzvotav tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, so we're going to skip now to the last two chapters, chapter 23, 24. My plan tonight is to get through that rather quickly. There will be some places we want to stop. It'll remind us of things that we read in the Torah and comparisons of Moses and Joshua again, and that'll lead us to the discussion of this article that I gave out at the beginning of the class, and Steve was great to send it out again. Steve, you've done a wonderful job. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Every week reminding people and providing the materials, it really makes it a pleasure. Thank you. And then finally, I want to, there's been a little bit of this in the weeks that have preceded when you started going after Joshua and you wanted to say what you thought of him, and that's great, but I want to get everybody's impression after tonight, just to get a feel for our thug uncle and his good qualities and his bad qualities, and what were our ancestors trying to do to convey this story. So we're on chapter 23, verse 1. Who would like to begin reading? Greg, would you like to read?
Sure.
Okay.
Much later, after the Lord had given Israel rest from all the enemies around them, and when Joshua was old and well advanced in years, Joshua summoned all Israel, their elders and commanders, their magistrates and officials, and said to them, I have grown old and am advanced in years. You have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all those nations on your account, for it was the Lord your God who fought for you. See, I have allotted to you by your tribes the territory of these nations that still remain, and that of all the nations that I have destroyed, from the Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. The Lord your God himself will thrust them out on your account, and drive them out to make way for you, and you shall possess their land as the Lord your God promised you.
Okay, why don't you stop there? Okay. So, what does it mean? Joshua was old. Ba bayamim. Ba bayamim. What's the Hebrew? Ba bayamim. He was old and he had come into many years. So, is that a redundancy? It seems like it, right. Ba bayamim means he's old, but zakein means old. And by the way, the word zakein comes from the root zayin kuf nun. And zakein is similar to the Hebrew word zakan. Anybody know what a zakan is?
Oh, right, the beard.
A beard. Zakan is a beard, right? When we say the Birkat HaMazon, right, we say, Nar hayiti v'gam zakanti, v'lo ra'iti tzadik ne'ezav. I was young, and now I'm old, and I have never seen a righteous person suffer. And then it goes on, Uvizaro mivakesh lachem, and his seed continuing to beg for food, or lacking food. So my teacher, Hanan Brichto, said that line, without the ending, it doesn't make sense. I was young, and now I'm old, and I've never seen a righteous person suffer. Now, who has, maybe when someone's really young, they could say, I've never seen a righteous person suffer. But if you are old and you've lived your life, how can anyone say they have never seen a righteous person suffer? But the last part, a righteous person suffer and his seed continue to be looking for bread. In other words, continuing suffering. This is Judaism's picture, big picture of the long run. It's the messianic view that eventually things will even out, even if we don't see it with our own eyes. This is the hope of Judaism. It's the driving force that keeps us doing mitzvot and continuing to consider ourselves God's partner. So that idea of zakein and zakan, growing older, and by the way, anybody know sign language? This is the sign for rabbi. Or this. It might be this. Yeah, I think it's this. It's the person with the beard. That's the sign for rabbi. So, all right. I learned a little bit of sign language a while ago. We had a couple of people who, in our kids growing up, who couldn't speak and he had hearing loss, and so for her blessing in front of the ark at her bat mitzvah. I learned to do the blessing and sign, and it was a small thing, but it meant a lot, I think, and we need to continue to do things like that in our congregations. So I am old and zakanti. So zakain and ba bayamim, I think they mean two different things. I think zakain means here chronological years, right? But ba bayamim means I have come into days. And I think that each day has lifetime of learning in it. It has things that we learn about life. So I'm not sure it's a redundancy.
Or maybe the days that he has left.
And it might be the days that he has left. Yeah, my day is coming. Maybe. Yeah, that would be a loose translation, but it's possible. I'm not against interpretive, translations. I like that.
He's really old.
Yeah, it could be that too. But is he really old? How many years old is he? We find out a little bit later, but the rabbis know. How many years old is he as he's about to die?
Was it 103?
Close. 100 and what?
110.
110. What's significant about that?
10 years less than Moses.
10 years less than Moses. It's the reminder again, he's not Moses, even if he seems like Moses. 10 years less. Isn't that interesting? It's not a whole generation. A generation's 20 years. Or 40 years, And 20 years is really a generation. But yes, and what's the greeting we say to people when on their birthday, or we wish them a toast?
It's 120.
120 in Yiddish, and in Hebrew, ad mea v'esrim. 100 to be 100. May you live to be 120.
And then the new Israeli one is maybe you live to be 100 and act as though you're 20.
100 and what? And act as though you're
100
20.
and act as though you're
Right.
20.
Well, that comes from the Midrash on Sarah when it says she was 100 and she was 20 and she was 7. They're in separate categories because when she was 100, she seemed like she was only 20 and she was as innocent as she was as 7. You see? So that's their Midrash there. Actually, I had a professor who said, may you live to be 150. He says, inflation. So that was his teaching. He lived to be 99. He died just before he was 100 years old. Jacob Marcus, he was the American Jewish history professor. So I am old and well stricken in years. So he says, get ready. We did this before, right? With Moses. We did this before. And he's reminding them now, don't forget. You've seen that everything that God did for you. Don't forget. It's so easy to forget. Once you get the gift, that's why we sing Dayenu, right? At the Seder. It would have been enough. We have to keep reminding ourselves that with each and every one of these deeds, there's gratitude. And what's Joshua trying to do? You still owe God. You still owe God, Don't forget the covenant. And he's saying also, it's not finished. We haven't conquered all of them, right? He says God will still do this. And by the way, you called it the Mediterranean Sea. In this translation, it says, I'll tell you the Hebrew first because it's more exciting to do it that way. They call that Yam HaGadol.
The big sea.
The big sea, right. Not the one that was the TV show, right? That's a different kind of big sea, right? That was a show by Cancer. Remember that? The Big Sea.
Oh, the big
The big sea.
Sea,
right.
yes.
No, the big sea is clearly the Great Sea. How many seas did they have to look at? How many bodies of water did they have to look at? 2. Really, they had 3, didn't they?
Yeah.
They had the Dead Sea. They had the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah, and the 4th one would be the Red Sea. And the Sea of Galilee, Yam Kinneret, the sea that looks like a harp, right?
And it's really kind of a medium-sized lake.
Oh, yeah, I
Sea
know.
of Galilee. It's not very big.
No, the lakes in Minnesota are much bigger than that. When I got on a boat, I said, oh, this is nothing, Very, very small, yeah. And we have 10,000 of them.
Right.
But water's still a very scarce commodity. By the way, one of the things that a father is responsible for with his son, the Talmud tells us, is he has to teach his son how to swim.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, it's interpreted a lot of ways. It means swim through life, teach them how to live properly. But they had seas, and there were accidents. People died, drowned in the Great Sea, most of all. Maybe even the Sea of Galilee too. It's deep. It's a big enough one when you're swimming into it. And the Dead Sea, you don't swim in that. That's pure. That was so filled with salt and minerals. Okay, so the Great Sea, and this is how they they talk about the land of Israel from the Jordan to the Great Sea, right? So that includes the West Bank. That's not a political comment, it's just a geographical one. All right, so he will thrust them out from you. In other words, there's still more coming up. There's still more coming up. And what do you have to do in return? This is his, and that's verse 6. Did you get to 6 yet?
I did not.
Okay, so let's continue with 6. Marty, would you like to read?
Yes, but just a comment.
Yeah, please.
The jihadis now cry, Palestine free from the river to the sea.
Right. Yeah, it's the same kind of literary expression, from the river to the sea.
But when you've got crowds on four corners of the main street in downtown San Francisco waving Palestinian flags, it's scary.
It is scary, you're right. You
Much
are right.
later,
Okay.
After the Lord had, but the most resolute to observe faithfully all that is written in the book of the teaching of Moses, without ever deviating from the right or to the left, and without intermingling with these nations that are left among you. Do not utter the names of their gods or swear by them. Do not serve them or bow down to them, but hold fast to the Lord your God as you have done to this day. The Lord has driven out great, powerful nations on your account, and not a man has withstood you to this day. A single man of you who put 1,000 to flight, for the Lord your God himself has been fighting for you, and he promised you.
Okay, let's stop for a second here. Okay, so there's some nice expressions in here. It says here, don't turn from the right to the left. I mean, we have expressions like that, right?
That's appeared before, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, not turning to the right or the left. What does that remind you of, too?
Do not add or take away.
Go straight
What's
ahead.
that?
Do not add or take away.
Do not add or take away. Okay, it's keep your eyes on the road. It's a keep your eyes on the road. Keep your goal in front of you, right? Also, they did farming, right? And what do they put on the animals? A yoke, right? To keep it going straight ahead to get the job done. And that's why it's there. Yes,
What
Sam.
does he call it? The book of the teaching of Moses?
Aha. What is the book of the teaching of Moses?
Torah.
Yeah, it's the Torah. That's right, the book of the teaching. That's important because later on we're going to hear about another book, and there's controversy over what that book is. But
What is it in Hebrew?
in Hebrew, right here, it says Sefer Torah Moshe. Yeah.
That's close.
And that's what Torah means. Torah means teaching. You know, people. What?
It's in the teaching of God rather than Moses.
That's a good question. But we call it the 5 books of Moses.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what is the word Torah? How have you seen it translated?
Law.
Law, right. It's very often translated law by people who don't know Hebrew. And there is law in it, but it's a lot more than just law. It's often used, translated as law by polemicists, those who are taking an attack on Judaism, that Judaism is just a legalistic religion. This is a lot of the Middle Ages polemics between Christians and Jews. Christianity is the religion of love, Judaism, the religion of law. Truth be told, there's law and love in both. And in fact, it's very easy to talk about the law in Christianity as being even more severe than the law in Judaism. Just open up the gospel according to Matthew. Matthew's goal, like Joshua, is to paint Jesus as the new Moses. Because Matthew was writing his gospel around the time when Paul was very successful with his antinomianism, which meant no respect for law. You don't need the law. You don't need to do the mitzvah. All you have to do is believe in the death and resurrection of Jesus. That's the new key to a good life and to heaven. But Matthew wrote in countering that by saying that we can't build a church unless there's some basis for law and authority. And any organization, anybody who's been involved in organizations, you all have, part of a temple, you need law and love, and that's that creation story I told you about, the mercy and the compassion, the hot water and the cold water I told last week. That's what you need a balance of. And in Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew compares the law of Jesus to the law of Moses. And in every case, the law of Jesus is more severe than the law of Moses. The easy one is the adultery one. That's the one that Jimmy Carter quoted in his Playboy interview where he said, I've been guilty of committing adultery in my heart. Because Jesus made that a crime, a sin. You shouldn't even think about it. Well, we can't always control what we think. We can control what we do with our thoughts in terms of turning them into action. So there's a good polemic in there too. But I think most responsible analysts of religion will tell you every religion has law and also has love. And there's plenty of love in the Torah as well. Maybe not a lot in Joshua with all the stuff he did, but it's there for sure. Okay, so don't turn to the right or the left. And then what's this business about not mentioning their gods? Well, you might not be worshiping it to mention the God, but what are you doing by mentioning their God?
You're acknowledging that they-
You're acknowledging it, right? Right?
Rekindling their memory.
That's right. Out of sight, out of mind is what they're trying to say. Don't keep bringing it up. You keep bringing it up, it's going to spur maybe your interest in it. I don't know. That seems to be what is being said here. Anybody here ever say, Jesus Christ? Huh? How many people have ever said that? Right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So I suggest that we have another reason not to say that. Okay? I think it's disrespectful. Yeah, I don't think it's going to make me want to worship as a Christian necessarily, but I think it's disrespectful to other people for whom Jesus Christ is their God and is a sacred kind of thing. I think that's more of a modern understanding of why we don't do that, but here they still had the same thing. Don't mention their name, right?
Isn't it just as bad to say, God damn it?
Yeah, I suppose, but saying God is not taking the name of the Lord in vain. This is something that Rabbi Brickdo taught me as well. I mean, I grew up, and if I use the word God, don't take the name of the Lord in vain. And I often got my mouth washed out with soap. I don't know whether you grew up in that generation, but that was a punishment in our house if you swore. And saying the name of God was swearing. But what it means to swear falsely in God's name means to make a promise that you know you can't keep, swearing it in the name of God. I swear to God that I will do this when you know you can't do that. That is taking the name of the Lord in vain, not just using the word God. But
What if you say God damn it, or you're
Yeah,
saying
that's right.
God, you're asking God damn it.
yeah,
Is that really being blasphemy to God?
I don't know. Did you ever feel like you really meant that?
No.
You never been that angry?
No.
No? Oh, good for you.
There was a bumper sticker that said, "Damn it, it's not God's last name."
There's good. That's good too. Right. No, it's not a good thing to say, but
Right.
people slip, and there's a lot of worse things. There's a lot worse things to say. But yeah. And listen, I play golf, and I have to tell you, I hear God's name far more often on the golf course than in the temple. So and that's a temple where we say God a lot. So yeah, it's
And then we don't know what God's name is. So.
That's right. G-O-D is not God's name, which is why when we have religious school teachers over the years, one of our policies was, we hired religious school teachers from lots of different backgrounds. Some of them came from Orthodox or conservative backgrounds, and many of them would not write G-O-D. I was brought up writing G-D,
I
right?
still don't do it. even
Yeah,
though
right,
I
because
know.
that's your habit, right.
I just-
But there's a great Reform response on this. You can go to the Reform Movement's website, the CCR, and look up a response under God's name is G-O-D. And they explain that G-O-D is not God's name, it's just one of the euphemisms we have. Because God's name, as we know it, is Yud-He, Vav-He.
Oh, we didn't notice.
No, it's Yud Hey Vav Hey, the 4-letter. It's called the Tetragrammaton.
Tetragrammaton,
Right.
yes.
But we don't know how it's pronounced. We do know it's not Jehovah because that's using the vowels of Elohim with the consonants of Adonai, and that was just it's done. But and some people say it's Yahweh, but no one knows. Again, I think I may have told you this before, but my teacher Hanan Brickdo with Yud Hey Vav Hey, he said it could just as easily be when you're calling God, go yoo-hoo, and he would say that. And first time he did that, I was shocked. But then I realized he wasn't far from the truth. We don't know how the name is pronounced. You might say to me, well, you should know because you're a Kohen, but my dad didn't tell me. So it didn't make it to my generation of how God's name was pronounced because it was only the Kohen Gadol who said it once a year. When did he say it? Yom Kippur. Where did he say it?
In the
Holy of Holies, right? And no one was in there with him. So, and he just told his son, or the next high priest, what that name should be. And it was used to call upon God to show mercy on the Israelites. Okay. Okay.
So that got lost
Rabbi?
with everything else.
What's that?
That got lost with everything else.
Yeah, with the ark. Maybe Steven Spielberg knows how it's pronounced. I don't know. Yes.
I have another way of thinking about this,
Yeah, please.
that, or do not swear by them. But we say sometimes, let's say a famous author,
Mhm.
and you might say, I swear by so-and-so that that is the truth.
Really?
Does that make
Like how?
sense?
What author would you say?
Or a particular saying, or something that, I'll say my father.
Oh, I swear on my
Right.
father's grave.
Yeah, that this is something that is true. Well, that would be not a good thing.
To use
For
an
a
idol,
God-
to use a false god's name.
Right, to swear by that God because you're saying, but I do believe.
Yes. If
And
you
what
would
this
swear
God-
by it, that means you're putting some faith in it.
Yeah,
Okay, that's a good point. All right, so let's finish this up. Verse 15. Okay, would you like to read?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Just as every good thing that the Lord your God promised you has been fulfilled for you, so the Lord can bring upon you every evil thing until he has wiped you off this good land that the Lord your God has given you. If you break the covenant that the Lord your God enjoined upon you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, then the Lord's anger will burn against you, and you shall quickly perish from the good land that he has given you.
Okay, does this sound familiar? Isn't this Moses' speech to the people too?
Blessings and curses.
Yeah, Moses said this many times throughout the Torah, and it's the old song. They're playing our song. This is an old song, and it's a song that, look, you're not in here unconditionally. Just like the people that were wiped out here before you, so that it would make room for you. I'm the landlord, God is saying, and there's rules. You know, lights out at a certain time. No, don't play the stereo at 3 a.m. You know, and there's lots of rules to be in a place that you're renting. And this is a reminder again and again, we don't own anything. It's all but lent to us. This was beautifully said in the old Union prayer book. Remember the old Union prayer book? Yeah, there were some beautiful prayers in there. And one of them was about that, the idea that we don't own anything. God is the landlord. And it's a good way to keep us from becoming too filled with ourselves and too cruel to other people over whom we have some power or some control. So, all right. You don't want God's anger to be kindled against you, right? That's pretty strong anger. Okay, so shall we go on in chapter 24? Are you surprised how fast we're moving here?
Yes.
Yes, me too. Would you like to read?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem.
Shechem, right. Anybody remember what Shechem is? Or what happened at Shechem?
Dina's
Somebody
rape.
built an altar.
Yes, and Dinah's rape, and then the subsequent slaughter of the guy.
Shechemites.
That's right.
3 days after they were circumcised.
That's correct. Well, they did the circumcision to set them up,
Right.
Yeah.
so they would be weak. That's exactly right. That was the revenge of Jacob's sons.
It was ugly.
Yeah.
Jacob
Well,
was-
we had more than one thug uncle. Just remember, this is our family tree we're talking about here. You know, and we know all the wonderful things, but it's okay to know
But it teaches us that they were human.
that's correct. You know, human and extremely human in some cases. Right. All right. So let's Shechem. So he gathered them all in Shechem.
He summoned Israel's elders and commanders, magistrates and officers, and they presented themselves before God. Then Joshua said to all the people, "Thus said the Lord, the God of Israel, in olden times your forefathers, Terah, father of Abraham and father of Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates and worshipped other gods. But I took your father Abraham from beyond the Euphrates and led him through the whole land of Canaan and multiplied his offspring. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau, and I gave Esau the hill country of
Seir.
as his possession, while Jacob and his children went down to Egypt."
Okay, I stopped for a second here. There's 4 verses. There's one thing I did leave out before. That another expression, I was talking about all the good expressions. One of you will give chase to 1,000. Okay? Does that sound familiar at all? What does that mean? One of you will give chase to 1,000.
Lead.
Lead or no, give chase. You're pushing away. What does that mean?
One Israeli soldier is worth 1,000
Enemies, yeah. So the point is, you will be so strong and feared, you'll be able to chase away 1,000 at a time, right?
It's just like what happened when they gave 1,000 Palestinians back. There was a trade over.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know. I wouldn't make that connection, but that's an interesting. It's an interesting comparison.
Soldier and
Well, what they're saying is though, one of you will give chase to 1,000. That's like the answer to your nightmares. Because I don't know about you, but I have a nightmare. I'm being chased by 1,000, right? So the idea of you chasing 1,000, you're pretty powerful and you're pretty scary, and people are going to leave you alone, right? It's like the old cowboy movies, you know, when the big guy comes into town, everyone scatters off the street, right? So, do you remember one of the figures in the Bible that had this said about him, or close to it? King David. How many did King David slay?
tens of thousands.
Yeah, but there's one phrase. King David, he slew only 800. It says here in 2 Samuel. Why did King David only kill, slaughter 800 and not 1,000?
Maybe that's all there were to slaughter.
No, that's a good guess. No, because David attributed the missing 200 to his own imperfection, which caused divine aid to be diminished. Isn't that remarkable? So he's not up to the category of giving chase or killing 1,000. Yeah, that song about David, that's a song where it says he killed his 10,000s, right? Yeah. Anyhow, so David did 800, and this phrase about giving chase to 1,000, because that's in other parts, that's in Deuteronomy too, that's in the Torah. And but it's notable that David did 800, and the rabbis interpret that saying that he diminished his own authority because of what did David do? Remember?
Bathsheba.
Yeah, Bathsheba. Not only Bathsheba, but he murdered her husband. Sent him to the front lines. Right? Did he send him to the front lines right away?
No,
What did he try to do?
he tried to get him to,
To what? No, you're right.
yeah.
What? To sleep with his wife. Right. He brought him home from the front lines because David had slept with him and he wanted to cover himself so that he brought him home, but he refused to because he wanted to be ready for war.
Well, he didn't want to take advantage while his troops were.
That was part of it. Yeah, why should I be home with my wife?
And they're out there in the mud.
Right, but the other thing is he wanted to be ready for war, sort of like athletes before the big game. You know, there's this whole theory, but he wouldn't. So David then sent him to the front lines to kill him because he had a chance. Because if he had come home and slept with his wife, then it would be okay for Bathsheba to be pregnant, because her husband would think that was his. So these stories, these are in the Bible. We didn't learn them in Hebrew school, religious school. They didn't teach them that. Right? Okay. It's an adult book, my friends. It's an adult book. Right? All right, so now what do we have here? The first 4 lessons, what are we hearing here? What's
Rabbi, I was going to say like this book, 50 Shades of Talmud.
oh, really? Oh. Is it black, white, or gray?
It's just like we don't know. Who's
Okay. I haven't read it, but so what is he doing here? What's Joshua doing? Look, he's about to die, right?
Right, he's reminding them of the history.
Yes, he's giving a history lesson. Exactly right. He's bringing him up to date, and he's starting
It's just what Moses did.
Yeah.
He reiterated
Deuteronomy. What is Deuteronomy? It's a second telling. It's a second law, and he goes through the whole. First we went here, and then we did this, and then that happened, and you guys forgot. You slid. We came back. God was with us. He's telling the story. So he starts naturally, not with Adam and Eve, but with Abraham.
He's
Right.
designating a replacement.
Yeah, and he's taking him up to the story. He starts with Abraham on the other side of the river, and brought him to Canaan.
or the
Canaan.
Chaldeans, right?
From Ur of Chaldeans, right? That's right, the Ur of Chaldeans, right? Okay, then he talks about the children, right? He got Isaac, and then from Isaac, Jacob, and Esau, and he mentions Esau's inheritance in Mount Seir. What does that mean then? I mean, maybe at this point, some of Esau's relatives are involved there, maybe in the battles. Who knows? I don't know that. Okay, and then Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. This is all sort of the prehistory before the big story. Okay? So verse 5. Who would like to read? Would you like to read? Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Myra.
Myra.
Not sure who I am.
What's that?
It's been a long couple of weeks. Okay.
Okay, Myra.
After you had lived a long time in the wilderness,
Let's
I
hope.
brought you to the land of the Amorites, who lived beyond the Jordan. They gave battle to you, but I delivered them into your hands. I annihilated them for you.
Okay, stop for a second. And yeah, I think we skipped a few verses just about the Egyptian experience, that's all. Yeah, and you just have the Moses. Verse 5, there you go.
Okay.
Do verse
Then I
5.
sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with the wonders that I wrought in their midst, after which I freed you. I freed your fathers from Egypt, and you came to the sea, but the Egyptians pursued your fathers to the sea of reeds with chariots and horsemen. They cried out to the Lord, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians. Then he brought the sea upon them, and it covered them, and your own eyes saw what I did to the Egyptians. That was Moses in the Red Sea.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly. And what did they sing at the Red Sea? Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Who is like you, O God, among the gods? So there's that acknowledgement of other gods. And in our prayer book, they put in the gods that are worshipped. So not to say that they're really gods, but they're worshipped as gods by other people. Right, that's right.
Superstitions.
Yeah, poo, right? That's right. Okay, good, Myra, thank you. And then he brought you to the land of the Amorites, and this is the story of, Og and Sichon, which is where Jordan's first battles with those two kings. And that's the Amorites, right? So he now picks up, he's putting himself right into the story. This is where I come in, he's saying, because he talked about the ones who came before, and Moses and Aaron, and now the Amorites. Okay, now he's going to take a couple other chapters, and again, what's he doing? He's connecting this book with what came before, isn't he?
He's also giving them credit.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not saying that he's forgotten what
They did before him, right? I'm not the guy who just came from Krypton, right?
Yeah.
Right. I'm not the Superman. I'm part of a line.
Yeah.
And that line it's continued after them, and it's going to continue after me. And that's the humility that he's going to express here. And that's another parallel with Moses, because Moses is known for being humble.
So this is thought to be the same writer as Deuteronomy. And yet in Deuteronomy, when Moses is reciting history, a lot of it is revisionist history, favorable to him. Do we see any of that here?
Well, let's read on some more and see what happens, okay? Yeah, I just think that he's linking himself to this great platform and standing up on this, it's like, we stand on their shoulders. There's a great song about standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. I'm not up on all the popular, Hebrew liturgical music right now, but standing on the shoulders is kind of a phrase, and I think that's what he's doing here, right?
He's also not under any time constraints.
No.
He's not going to die right after he finishes speaking.
And they're not also being chased the way that Moses was being chased by the Egyptians, remember? I mean, Moses had to do all this stuff, boom, boom, split second. Joshua didn't have them chasing him as he crossed the Jordan River. He was a little different kind of story. It's a much slower story. Okay.
And didn't see themselves as grasshoppers anymore.
That's right. They didn't see themselves as grasshoppers. And they knew what God could do. And they weren't forgetting. He doesn't want them to forget. So now here's a big story. And why do we choose this story of all the stories in the Torah? Verse 9. Who would like to read next? Anybody? I skipped you guys over there if you want to read.
Thereupon Balak, son of Zippor, the king of Moab, made ready to attack Israel. He sent for Balaam, son of Beor, to curse you, but I refused to listen to Balaam. He had to bless you, and thus I saved you from him. Then you crossed the Jordan, and you came to Jericho.
So he picks Balaam. That's a story. That's a wonderful story about how God speaks from the strangest places, and sometimes we have opportunities to stop doing the wrong thing, and we miss them, right? Okay. Even through people like Balaam, who was a pagan prophet, God found a way to speak through him too. By the way, this theme plays later in a real, I think, a horrible theological way. When the temple is destroyed, there's rabbinic theology that claims that Nebuchadnezzar really was acting on God's behalf, and he was a great enemy who destroyed Babylonian king, who destroyed the temple. And the same thing with the Romans. It's amazing what lengths the rabbis go to explain the catastrophes and how the Second Temple, really, the reason it was destroyed. Do you know what the main argument the rabbis give? I mean, the Romans destroyed it, right?
Yeah.
But what's the main reason that the rabbis give?
Because of the corruption among the ranks.
Sinat chinam, which is senseless hatred of one Jew for another.
Yeah.
And this is a very powerful theme that the rabbis try to find explanations and sometimes blame ourselves. We blame ourselves as the victim.
Sometimes they're not even about the Holocaust.
And about the Holocaust, we heard Muhammad Abbas claim that the Jews were collaborators with the Nazis and they wanted it to. That was one of those PR battles that they didn't do so well. I think that was helpful to Israel.
Even their own people kind of do the opposite.
Right. Okay, so let's continue because I do want to finish this so we can discuss the article after our break. So Balak, and then verse 11.
Okay, so then you crossed the Jordan and you came to Jericho. The citizens of Jericho and the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, and Jebusites.
And what are these known as? The 7 pagan nations. These are the 7 forbidden nations.
But I delivered them
That's right.
into your hands. I sent a plague ahead of you, and it drove them out before you, just like the 2 Amoritic kings, not by your sword or by your bow.
Okay, so your translation says plague, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, this one is called, it's Sirah, and the translation here is the hornet.
What?
It's the hornet. And here's the rabbinic explanation of this, okay? I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out from before you, even the 2 kings of the Amorites, not with your sword and not with your bow. It's this hornet. Hornet, it says, a flying insect resembling the bee in the structure of its body and its way of life. It does not produce honey, however. Its stings are very painful and are sometimes fatal. Scripture refers to swarms of hornets. Said Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, the hornets stood on the banks of the Jordan and sprayed venom, which blinded their eyes from above and castrated them from below. Rav Papa maintains that there were 2 types of hornets, one at the time of Moses and one at the time of Joshua. The one at the time of Moses did not cross the Jordan, whereas the one at Joshua's time did cross the Jordan. Others interpret Sirah as akin to Tsarat, leprosy. Barbanel explains that the dread of the Israelites, fear of the Israelites, who had miraculously vanquished Sihon and Og, is compared to a hornet or a wasp. This is the first time in history that a Jew's compared to a wasp. Okay.
Hornets and wasps are the
Needless to say, it took care of business.
What's that?
Hornet and wasp are the same, different names of the same animals, insects.
Yeah, but they're different.
And they don't die when they sting.
No, they're just different names.
Are they really?
Yeah.
A hornet and a wasp? I thought there were different kinds of bees.
Although they're not bees, they're hornets or wasps.
Okay.
We need an entomologist.
But the bee
Oh,
dies after it
entomologist?
stings.
What's that?
The bee dies after it stings.
Right.
Hornets and wasps do
They
not.
don't. They can continue to
They have
sting.
a straight stinger. The
Goes
bee-
in and comes up.
Yeah, the bees is hooked so that it doesn't come out.
Neither do they. Yeah.
Or
Okay.
breaks off and.
And then they die. Right. Okay. All right. Very good. We
Don't-
need an entomologist and an etymologist.
How do you
Both,
get rid of a
right.
hornet's
That's one-
nest?
Yeah.
You don't try to knock it down when it's full of hornets.
The hornet's nest.
You don't try to knock it down when it's full of hornets.
Right.
You may not survive.
Right. Yeah. No, I call our pest control service when I see a hornet's nest in my
But we're
yard.
usually we have little ones.
Did you?
These paper.
Paper
Some
wasps.
of
Yeah,
them-
paper wasps are not as dangerous, right? Yeah, our guy comes out. He says, "Oh, that's just a paper wasp." And he hits it, and I go inside. I go inside and get my shot. All right, where are we here?
13.
13. Okay, let's continue.
I have given you a land for which you did not labor and towns which you did not build, and you have settled in them. You are enjoying vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant. Now therefore revere the Lord and serve him with undivided loyalty. Put away the gods that your forefathers served beyond the Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Or if you are loath to serve the Lord, choose this day which ones you are going to serve, the gods that your forefathers served beyond the Euphrates, or those of the Amorites in whose land you are settled. But I and my household will serve the Lord.
Okay, as for me and my house, a spirit note of defiance rings through the words. Were all to prove unfaithful, he would not fear to be a minority of one. This is what Joshua said. In the same spirit, Mattathias declared many centuries later, right, the Maccabees, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away everyone from the religion of their fathers, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. So it's that same kind of an argument. Look, all who are with me stand with me, but even if you don't, I'm standing here, right? Moses did this when he came down from the mount, and then you had the revolution, remember?
Yeah.
Edward G. Robinson got swallowed up, right? Yes, Greg.
Is it something out of nothing, or does it have any significance, the way that this kind of narrative, this admonition is switching between first person and third person?
That's a good question. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I'm wondering, I'm kind of wondering, I'm assuming that Joshua at this stage has the authority and has the gravitas.
Clearly he
to
does.
say
He's got the
this.
gravitas. Good.
Yet
good
he
term.
also, back in verse 23, as Sam pointed, I was struck by the reference to the book of Moses. I don't recall that being referred to previously as an authoritative source. We talked about the law, and we talked about the ark and these relics,
But now the Torah.
But now it's the Torah, and now it's Joshua, and he's at the end of his life, and he's giving this speech, and he better be the man at this point if he's going to give this sort of speech. Yet he bounces back and forth between I
and he. So what do you think that could be? Different writers. Yeah, it could be the text being brought together, and one was written in the third person, one was written in the first person. There's some contemporary authors who do that too, when they're telling a story, I think. They switch back and forth. But this may be two different authors. It may be bringing together of two texts. Could be. I wouldn't be able to tell you that authoritatively, but that's a possibility. But it's a very good thing that you notice. But you're absolutely right. He now has the gravitas, and he's standing as Moses did at the end of his life, recounting the story and giving them one more last zetz. You've got to behave. You've got to keep the covenant represented by the Torah. And using the Torah, it gives you great authority, because this is why when the New Testament was written, there's so many references that go to the Jewish Bible. Because every time they did, people knew the Jewish Bible. They knew and had that authority. Now, this is too soon, but it's written later. And so by then, it does have that authority. Steve, did you have a question?
I don't know if this is too much of a stretch, but in Shakespeare, Henry VIII, I think it is, where that famous soliloquy with the band of brothers.
Yeah.
And he talks about St. Christmas Day, where, make your choice, either stand with me and we'll be famous even if we lose, or go home. And then, of course, Churchill did that in one of his famous speeches. Well, here it says the same thing. If you loathe to serve the Lord, choose this day which one you're going to serve.
Exactly.
Yep.
This one or that one. Me or them. It's us or them.
Yeah, stand with me in this famous battle, or...
Yeah, and this is a...
Because I'm going to fight them.
That's right.
But
With or without you.
Here, we don't want you here.
No, that's
go,
right.
Go over there.
No, I think that's a very good point. And this is a very common literary theme. And it's in Game of Thrones. You have the same kind of thing when you have battles. This is like the rallying cry is what it is. And
I thought he was speaking.
what's that?
I thought he was speaking the voice of God, and then he was speaking his.
Yeah, very often. Yeah. So the I may be the voice of God.
Yeah.
Could be. Yeah, that's what happens with Moses too. Because a prophet is the spokesperson for God. So that's another alternative. That's good. Yes, Marty.
There is no penalty, though, for those who go with him. You can say you want to worship another God, go ahead and do it.
Well, no. Look at verse 9. How far are we now? Let's skip over. Let's go to 19, and then we're going to get to the end because I want to give you a break and then come back. I do want to talk about this one too. And if Aaron wants to, he can finish up all the details. So 19. And Joshua said to them, "You cannot serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions, your sins." So he's saying, if you don't stand with me, you're going to get yours. You just wait and see. If you forsake the Lord, serve strange gods, that he will turn and do you evil and consume you. After that, he hath done you good. After what how can you do that to them? But it works, because in verse 21, the people say, "No, we'll serve the Lord." And now he says, "You're witnesses against yourselves." He's making a deal with them. He's getting them to sign the petition. They're signing up for the service. And
Well, there's an or else aspect.
there is an or else. That's correct. Just like our parents told us, Okay, so 25, Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, set them a statute and ordinance in Shechem, and Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God. Aha, in the book of the law of God. Now this is a little different phrase. And the rabbis say, this cannot mean that Joshua added this as an appendix to the Pentateuch, the Torah, and included it therein. Firstly, because the books of Moses were too sacred to be tampered with. You try to change a word in the Torah, you're sunk, buddy, right? And secondly, because the words are not to be found there. It may indicate that he wrote them on a scroll, which he deposited in the same place together with the book of the law of God, the Pentateuch, so some commentators. It is, however, hard to read this meaning into the text. The difficulty disappears if we render with the book of the law of God. The intention would be then that he wrote his book, including all the events recorded therein, as well as the covenant, as the book following the book of the law of God, following the Pentateuch. That's what a Barbanel says. The rabbis explain the phrase as applying to the last 8 verses of the Pentateuch, when Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there to the end of it. Remember, because everyone says Moses couldn't have written that. Yeah. So maybe that's what Joshua added, and therefore that's what he's saying, adding to the book. Or the chapter on the cities of refuge, which is something he set up when he came in. So this is very interesting commentaries. These are from the Middle Ages. These are our ancestors who read the text just like we're doing, asking the same questions, and these are some of their suggestions. Okay, so, and Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and he took a great stone. It was common practice to set up a stone to commemorate an event of importance. Remember, Joshua commemorated the crossing of the Jordan in this manner. Remember, he put a big stone when they crossed the Jordan a few chapters ago. And he set it up there under the oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And very often the oak tree serves as a place where things are set up. Joshua said unto all the people, "Behold, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it hath heard all the words of the Lord which he spoke unto us." That's really personifying a stone. And why is a stone a good thing to be a witness?
It doesn't last forever.
It lasts forever. That's right. It
Just
lasts.
don't tap it. Talk to it. Don't tap it.
There you go. I like that.
Pull the sticks away from it.
Yeah, that's it. Keep the sticks away. It shall be therefore a witness against you, lest ye deny your God. So Joshua sent the people away, every man unto his inheritance. Okay, and I'm sure that Aaron will go over the parts where he talks in chapter 22, where he makes sure that he concludes that agreement with the 2.5 tribes, that stayed on the other side. That's a very important thing, because that sets up precedence for keeping them together, even if they're in the diaspora, even if they're outside of the Holy Land. And that's a really good paradigm. And it came to pass, and sounds so much like Deuteronomy, after these things that Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in the border of his inheritance in Timnath Serach, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, on the north of the mountain of Gaash. And Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders that outlived Joshua, and had known all the work of the Lord that he hath wrought for Israel. And the bones of Joseph, remember this? Don't forget, which the children of Israel brought up out of Egypt, buried they in Shechem, in the parcel of ground which Jacob bought of the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. Very similar to the cave of Machpelah with 400 pieces of silver. And they became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. And Eleazar, the son of Aaron, died, and they buried him in the hill of Pinchas, his son. Remember Pinchas? The guy with the spear? Which was given him in Mount Ephraim. So this is just a wonderful ending.
But he
Very-
doesn't name the successor.
Nope, he doesn't name a successor because after him come the judges. And there's different ones. And judges aren't like the judges that sit at a bench.
Yeah.
These judges are like the big
Well, look
cowboys.
what happened until they did name,
It was havoc. It was havoc. It was the judges reigned in a time where it was great havoc, and they sort of brought the people together. And eventually, the judges lead to the monarchy.
the first one was Deborah.
First one of Deborah.
Judges,
She's
Deborah.
one of them. Yeah, I think if you go through, I'm not sure she's the very first. I haven't looked at judges in a while. Judah and Shimon. So they go up in the fight. I'm not sure who the first one is, but you have to look at that some other time to follow it. Anyhow, so we've come to the end, Chazak, even though it's not one of the 5 books of the Torah. But this is a wonderful book. I mean, we've got the beginning, the first 7 or 8 chapters, and see the ending. And this is a continuation of our history from Torah into the next stage. So let's take a break. It's 5 to 8. Take a 5-minute break, come back at 8. And then we're going to talk about anything you can do, I can do better. I have a few things that I underlined in here, and we'll go over them, okay? Thank you, Steve. You can do, I can do better.
It's in the folder.
It's in the folder. I may have an extra copy. I think that I just gave mine away.
He'll remember that when he goes up there.
There, I got another copy. You need another one? Anybody needs one, I have another one.
that if it's extra.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Sure.
Put off my hat, please.
I don't know if I have another one.
I didn't see this.
Should be
I
your book.
might have one more, but let's see.
You know, there's a bunch of extra copies.
No, I don't have
on the
another one of
desk.
that.
Not a
Sorry.
problem.
That's something
I'll
else.
sh- I'll share yours.
I thought I saw it. Maybe not.
All right, so let's take a look at this article. Anything you can do, I can do better. Joshua as Moses. And I learned a lot reading this. I didn't realize there are only 3 Haftarot from the book of Joshua. And by the way, why do we have the Haftarot from the prophets? Oh, you had it.
Jews weren't allowed to study Torah.
Yeah, there were times in our history, I think during the Roman period, when Jews were forbidden to read the Torah. Did you ever see those commercials about is it the Black College Fund, and they have scenes of African Americans studying secretly, and then people write up and they put all the books away, and mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same kind of thing where Jews were forbidden to study Torah, and under great penalty, probably capital punishment. I think that reveals something about what our enemies knew. What does that tell us about what our enemies knew when they forbid us to study Torah? What's that? And why is the Torah forbidden? What do they recognize about the Torah and the Jewish people?
Our love of freedom,
provided
for one
strength.
thing.
It provided strength. It was the key. It was our strength comes from Torah. This is something that Jews sometimes don't know.
Is this
That-
why the synagogues were on the second floor?
Oh, to keep it hidden?
In the Middle Ages?
I don't know. That's a good question.
In Venice,
It's cheaper to
Venice,
cool.
they're all, I'm sure it's all.
Yeah.
Upstairs.
Yeah.
And then.
I don't know if that's because of the.
Maybe that's because of the flooding. Yeah, that's what I would think in Venice.
I'll have to go back in my notes.
There's probably a lot of theories on it, and that might be one of them.
Visited those.
They didn't want people to know what was going on.
Right.
They had 5 windows.
But this is why, by the way, in many Sephardic synagogues, they had sand on the floor. Some say it was to remind them of their trek through wilderness, but when there's sand on the floor, it keeps things quiet.
St. Thomas was like. And that
St.
was-
Thomas, right?
St. Thomas. I saw the rabbis breaking the floor when I was there.
And Curacao as well. Yeah, I've been in both those synagogues. They're beautiful.
The Dutch and English are colonies.
Right, that's right. So there were 3 Haftarot taken from Joshua, and the reason Haftarot were taken from the prophets, they couldn't read Torah, but they wanted to give Jews a diet of texts. So if you go to the synagogue, you get Torah. And later on, after Torah was allowed to be studied, they kept the Haftarot because This allowed people to get a taste of the Torah and a taste of the prophets. What about the writings?
Proving this on, other times.
Yes, there are at other times, but originally the writings weren't part of the Torah. The way the books were canonized, the Torah was canonized first, then the prophetic literature, and the Ketuvim were the latest of the books to come into the Torah, including Ezra and Nehemiah, which are at the very end of our order. But in the Septuagint and in the Christian Bible, which is also a Jewish order, Ezra and Nehemiah are put closer to Kings, and Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles are put closer in. But we know that the Torah and the prophets were in there before the writings from looking at a scene in the New Testament, which I think I've shared with you before. It's called the Transfiguration. And that's when Jesus is up on the mountain and he's transfigured, and standing next to him are Moses on one side and Elijah on the other. And the question is, why Moses and Elijah? Because Moses represents the Torah and Elijah represents the prophets. And the question is, why not also, King David representing Psalms or Proverbs? But that wasn't yet part of the canon at the time of the New Testament when it was written in the end of the first century. It came a little bit later. But the rabbis solved that because if you look at much of the Midrash, which consists of a lot of sermons and homiletics from that era, they almost always began their sermons with a quotation from Psalms or Proverbs or Esther or something in the writings. So therefore, a Jew going to the synagogue would get a taste of the Torah, a taste of the prophets, and a taste of the writings, a full course meal. And that's really what their aim was. And by the way, we know that there are 5 books from the wisdom literature, from the Ketuvim, that we do get once a year at least. There are 5 holidays and we read the 5 scrolls. Now we think of the scroll as Esther, right? But there are 4 other scrolls. In fact, Pesach, what was the book from, what scroll did we read? You remember? Which of the books of the writings? What's that? No, Esther is Purim. So Purim, and then a month later, we read in the springtime, remember? When a young man's fancy turns to love. The Song of Songs. The Song of Songs. Shavuot is coming, right? My favorite book of the writings. What scroll do we read on Shavuot? Ruth, right. And then Tisha B'Av. Lamentations, right? And then finally Sukkot. Kohelet, right. So those are the 5 scrolls that we get as part. So that diet is very important. So besides this beginning of Joshua, when is that read? The beginning of Joshua is read.
It's coming up now.
No, it comes up on, yes, it may be, but it's Simchas Torah. It's Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is when it's in the Ashkenazi tradition and in the Sephardic as well, because they only picked the first chapter, the first 8 or 9 verses. The rabbis were as uncomfortable as we are with the violent contents. They didn't want to keep bringing that up. And especially when they were being ruled by another power. They didn't want to think that they were asking people to be involved in insurrection. So they really put the cover on the violent parts of Torah because they didn't want them to think that they were trying to revolt. So that's one of them. But there are 2 others that I didn't realize. Well, I did know, but I didn't put it together. Shalach Lecha in the Torah when Moses sends out the spies. Yes, that's right. That was your Torah portion, right? And the Haftarah was? That's right. When Joshua sent out the 2 spies. And by the way, he learned because Moses sent out how many spies? 12. Joshua knew that was a good idea. He only sent out 2, and I'm sure they were like in his cabinet.
Handpicked.
What?
Handpicked.
They were handpicked. That's right. So, you get 12 Jews, you got 13 opinions. But 2, you only have a chance for 3.
But I think God told Moses to send out 12.
Yes, he did. One
one
from each
every
tribe.
Right.
They wanted to be Democrat.
Exactly.
But Joshua's, forget democracy. I'm going to rule this in a different way. Okay. Now, I think that a better Haftarah would be not better, but just as good would be the last part of 24 that we just read, with Joshua saying farewell and saying he died at the age of 100, because that would fit really well with the end of the Torah, right? Because it's the same as Moses' death. And you'd see clearly Moses 120, Joshua's 110. That would raise that, okay, Moses is better than Joshua. But there are other things about Joshua that,
Well, you have to connect it to the Torah portion.
yeah, well, you could.
And by,
At the end of Deuteronomy, which is the Simchas Torah, you have the end of Joshua, which is very similar to the end of Deuteronomy. The death of Moses, the death of Joshua. Okay, so let's take a look at the next page. The successor,
What did they opt for? What's
the first chapter of Joshua, is the Haftarah for Simchas Torah.
No.
Oh.
Since they didn't connect the end of Deuteronomy with the end of Joshua, what is
The book of Joshua, the first chapter. The first chapter.
Well, he's saying what's-
Yeah, because it shows the continuity from the end of Deuteronomy to the beginning of Joshua. Like, and you know, the same writer kind of thing. And it's a continuation of the story. It's the successorship, rather than the death of Joshua, which I think would go as well.
suggesting it might have been a sixth book rather than...
Yes, maybe. Yeah, and that led to that controversy. Exactly right. We don't know the answer. I mean, some scholars will tell you that it is, and some will say it isn't. Right. Okay. So, when Joshua first begins, and this is a very important point, he's called Moses' attendant, Misharet Moshe. But near the end, what we just read, he's called finally the servant Eved Adonai, and that was a term only reserved for Moses. So that's where he reaches his gravitas. When he's called the Eved Adonai, just like Moses was, then that's where he gets his power, right? All right, good. By the way, we're so convinced of how great Moses is, right? But think back to a few weeks ago at the Passover Seder, right? How many times did you mention? You didn't mention him he's not in the Haggadah, right? It's the same. You don't put someone up so high that they become godlike. Okay, good. I think also it's significant that the Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh comes up again and again. And it's a very important part of Joshua, and that was an important story that's told a couple of times in the Torah as well. Again, here's 2.5 tribes who seem to be leaving, but it's the Torah and the text goes out of its way to say they can be outside of the land of Israel and still be part of the people. And this is a theme that we still have today, you know. Recently, there's been a lot written about how Netanyahu is sort of devaluing the diaspora and our input. And, you know, first of all, with the dealing of what happened at the wall in terms of not allowing liberal Judaism to have the place, which he had agreed to before because of the pressure from his right wing and from the ultra-Orthodox. And the conversion process, which they had a deal on a few years ago. And so the role of the diaspora is becoming a little diminished. And politically as well. I mean, you know, Netanyahu, it was very clear that Netanyahu had this antipathy toward Obama and has this great connection to Trump when, if you look at the American Jewish population, it's the opposite. The majority of the American Jews, over 75%, voted for Hillary. And so it's clear that there's a disconnect. What's that? Oh, I know. I've been here for a long time, right? But I'm just pointing out that, and I'm not trying to be preferential in politics, but this is that same theme. Can the diaspora and the people in Israel have mutual respect? This goes on in the Talmud too. The Babylonian Talmud, there's lots of digs at those in Palestine and vice versa. The Babylonians are made fun of in the Palestinian Talmud, in the Jerusalem Talmud. So you can, yeah, go ahead.
Don't you think that the biggest thing that Joshua has in his favor is that he was the only one who was allowed to live to go into the land?
Yeah,
of
that's
Israel?
that's significant.
And that's even bigger than Moses. I mean,
he got to go in, right?
So isn't that the biggest recognition?
I think so. I think I would agree with you. I think that Joshua getting to enter the land he gets the ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, and he's the only one.
The only one. Well, Caleb also.
Caleb.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
other
two of
spy.
them. Yeah, the two that brought the good
Yeah.
report. They earned it.
Aaron said that Caleb died in another.
Which is Aaron?
You
Oh.
said that Caleb died, which book?
Caleb dies in Judges, yeah.
Yeah, later. So Caleb's still alive. Yeah, Chalef, yeah.
But that to me is the biggest thing in favor of Joshua.
I agree with you. I agree with you, right? And what is it that Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh have to do to earn this piece of land? They have to fight with them. They have to join it. They have to support them. And that's the role of the diaspora Jewry. What?
Yeah, they had to lead the way.
They volunteered. They said, we want you to believe us, so we'll be the shock troops.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, the shock troops, the ones who were on the front lines. Exactly, so, and that's, listen, we American Jews don't have to be on the front lines, but our support of Israel is a powerfully significant, not just money, but our political support. We lobby for Israel to continue to get aid and help, and to get the dome, the Iron Dome, which has saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. Right? Okay.
Maybe Joshua learned from Moses' mistakes.
Yes, I think he does. I think Joshua does learn from some of Moses' mistakes. I think he was a good.
Moses.
Yeah, he was a good student.
Right.
He was a good student. I think he learned a lot. Okay, so and there's that same thing again, the Hexateuch theory. I don't know. I really don't know what I believe, whether it's the sixth book or not. I'm not sure you can ever really know. Then the literary competition, but as much as Joshua does to earn that status, comes off a little short. Even though if you read through this article, again and again it says Joshua advantage, right? But yet he still has 110 years, not 120. He's still a reflection of Moses, because in the Midrash, remember, Moses is the sun and Joshua is the moon, right? By the way, I just finished a wonderful book called Moon Glow. Have anybody read it? By Michael Shaban. You know who Michael Shaban is? Yeah, he's a great Jewish writer. Yeah. And Moon Glow is a wonderful, wonderful book. But my favorite is the Yiddish Policeman's Union. You know,
I've read that.
one I read.
That's fabulous. It's about Alaska becoming the
Yes.
Jewish state. Yeah, it's a terrific book. But Moon Glow, in Moon Glow, there's a famous quotation of Werner von Braun, and it's a lot about Werner von Braun. That book you read. Oh, you didn't read Moon Glow yet. And he said, "There is no such thing as the dark side of the moon." And we always talk about the dark side. It was that famous song, right? The swing era, right? The dark side of the moon. Yeah, there's no dark side of the moon. The moon has no light whatsoever. The only light you see on the moon, that's the sun. That's the reflection of the sun. And that's how in the Midrash, Joshua is pictured, which is sort of a denigration, that he's sort of the moon. Although to the rabbis, the moon was the lesser of the two bright lights.
What was the name of that other book about Alaska?
It's called The Yiddish Policeman's Union. Is that what it's called? Right, something like that?
Right, the Yiddish Policeman's Union.
Yeah, the Yiddish
Shaban,
Police.
I read that book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
But this other book that you read.
Yeah, Moon Glow.
Yeah.
It's worthwhile.
Really?
Yeah, it's very good.
But completely different ideas.
Oh yeah, it's about the space program in a
Oh.
sense, and it's also really it's about Michael Shaban. It's a fantasy
Policeman's Union.
autobiography. I mean, it's a memoir, but it's fictional. But there's a lot of parts to it that are reflecting Michael Shaban's life. His wife and his grandfather and his grandmother. It's all in the book.
Spell his last name.
Chabon. I don't know. It's Shaban or Shaban. Anybody know how it's pronounced?
Yeah,
I
I think
think it's
Shaban.
Chabon. I think he says
Chabon. Chabon. It could be Chavon too.
I assume it's written in English.
It's in English. Yes. Yeah, he's an English writer.
Oh, you said he was
He's Jewish, but he writes in English.
not an Israeli.
No, he's not an Israeli. No, he's American.
Have a thesaurus with you.
Yeah, he likes to use books.
Oh, yeah.
Or take some classes with Hanan Brichto, because Hanan Brichto uses that kind
Or
of.
use your Kindle. And
Or use your Kindle, right? You can look up the words. That's right. That's one of the great advantages of Kindle.
I hate it when
Okay,
they're
so-
not in the dictionary.
And then you have, he learned from, because he sends 2 spies instead of 12, the splitting of the sea and the splitting the river. He brings up Cecil B. DeMillan here. What? Yeah. Circumcision. The circumcision is sort of the preparation to have the Seder. They wanted to have a kosher Seder, so he wanted to have a... And that also shows that Moses got so much pressure, he didn't really have time to do the proper thing and have them circumcised along the way. It's a whole different set of circumcised. Joshua now, of circumstances, Joshua now has the opportunity to finish what Moses didn't do. He's completing. And it says that when someone takes on a mitzvah that someone else started, and a person completes a mitzvah, that person who completes it gets credit for doing the mitzvah, even though it didn't begin with that person. That's an important, I think, Jewish principle as well. And the sandals, I love that. They both take off their shoes. I'm a fire sign theory in that series. Take off your shoes is a big thing. Shoes for industry. But the sandals, why do you take your sandals off? Yeah, but why do you have to take sandals off for holy ground, huh?
Who knows where you've been walking before? Who knows where you've been walking before?
Okay, that's true. And that's why I still go to some people's houses, they make you take your shoes off when you walk in the house. Not just Japanese.
That's because they have white
Yeah.
carpet.
Yeah, sometimes.
No, yeah.
But taking off your shoes is a sign of respect, in a sense. It's softer. But I'd also like to suggest a link to the symbol of the sukkah. We have to stop because I want to have you talk too. I've been doing all the talking here. The symbol of the sukkah, when you're in a sukkah, and I love this meaning of the sukkah, and you stand there, you're standing on ground, right? You're standing on earth. And you're looking up and you look through the schach. So at night you see the stars and the moon, right? The reflection of the sun, whatever. And then you have these flimsy walls, right? They're four.
God's hands.
What's that?
God's hands.
God's hands. Okay, good. But one of the things I learned from my teacher, Eugene Mahali, he said, when you stand in the sukkah, you stand on the ground, a reminder from where you came, from dust and ashes, from earth, right? And then you look up and you see the heavens, which is sort of your goal, right? You have the walls around you, which are the walls you build in your house, in your life. You build walls of security. And yet, that security is flimsy, no matter how strong you think they are. Because I don't know about you, but I've built sukkahs that there's like a big rainstorm and it falls over. The wind could knock it over. Swift wind can come up. And you're supposed to put it up again right away. This is a lesson about life. But my teacher said, you stand in the sukkah, you look around and you see your sense of security. But you feel underneath you are earthbound and heaven bent. And I just love the symbol. So the idea of standing on ground, you don't want anything in between you and the ground. There's a connection to the earth, which is where we come from. Anyhow, I want to hear from you, because you've spent up to 7 weeks. A few of you have spent all 7 weeks studying this so far, and you're going to study some more, I hope. Remember, a great teacher. He taught those other classes, and your memory doesn't have to go back that far to remember what a great teacher Aaron is. So I hope you'll continue to come for as long as he teaches it. What do you?
Can I start?
Yes, please. Tell me.
Why he's such a thug. I mean, he's just doing what God is willing him to do.
Well, maybe God's a thug.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't see him as such a thug.
Well, what did he do at Ai? Remember, with the ambush, and he killed all those people, and or at Jericho, right?
Yeah.
I think he was doing what was being done during that period of time. And in fact, it's still happening today.
I was going to say, it's not just then.
No.
Right.
He was, in order to have a place, they went in and they killed people. Well, that's an invasion. We still have invasion happening today. It's part of the way the world works. For me, it's hard to read.
Right.
Because it doesn't make sense to me in terms of what our beliefs are about murdering people and taking land from somebody else. It doesn't fit, but I do understand that it was what was happening then. And I also thought it was interesting.
But before you do that, I want to go back and let her finish, because you started.
Say was God was giving him the green light.
God was giving him the green light. Not only that, he had to do this.
No, more than a green light.
Yeah.
Right. Now, these were his.
It was a mandate.
These were his marching
This
orders.
is what
a
I
mandate.
command you to do.
Right.
It had to be done.
Yes.
It's
I
not
would
something
suggest
to argue
that
about.
it's actually just the opposite, that it's not justified because God was giving him the green light.
Then why,
Every
Jeff?
nation and every people invents origin myths and national conquest myths to justify their conquest.
And to give them the authority of keeping
We've
it.
done it, everybody else has done it, that's what you do.
Mhm.
So to say, want to say it was okay and justifiable because I was commanded to do it, that's fine, but every nation, every people has done that.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how you distinguish yourself from anybody else by saying, well, this was okay.
Because God said so.
Because God said so.
Yeah. Whose version of God are you going to use, right? Everybody couldn't give that argument. That's true.
Well, it depends on which.
If you read the Quran, some of the same stories that we have about our claims, they trace through Ishmael. Ishmael, who's their answer, and the same story about Isaac and the binding of Isaac. Here's the binding of Ishmael.
Exactly.
It's the same story.
Although it wasn't as militaristic, I just finished reading stories, Hopi stories of their creation story, having emerged from the bottom of the Grand Canyon and told by the Creator, I will give this land to you if you will be, I'm the landlord, you are the tenant. He was very clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I will give this land to you to take care of so long as you follow my precepts. And
Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Jeff?
Sounds real familiar.
Except it wasn't the land of milk and honey.
Well, to them it
Yeah, sure.
it sure was.
You bet. You bet. Still
Not
is.
too much rain up there.
But, and then we take it away from them because we have our own stories, so.
Well, wasn't God doing like a cleansing like he did in Noah's time?
Yeah, it's clearing out the people. They didn't keep it. They didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Gods and God was trying to start over again. And
Right. No, that's the repetition of that creation story. You're right.
Except-
So your work has taken you into this area of working with the Hopis, and
It has.
oh, you're done with your work.
No, it will go on longer than I will.
Good. But it's been a good cultural experience for you as well as professional.
It goes along.
Educational.
It
Yes.
goes along as long as there's money, right?
Yeah.
To pay the fees.
Well,
My friend the cynic.
yeah, right. but I know him too. So no, that's it's great. I was fascinated last week or 2 weeks ago when you were talking about your work up there, and that's terrific. Yeah.
But if the Bible or the stories are written after these events,
Right.
then
Right, they are written
you've
after.
kind of created, as Jeff said, you've kind of created a backward way of looking at it.
Mhm.
This thing happened, now we have to explain why it happened.
Well, one thing that's very clear is the stories of the Bible were written long after they took place, and they were oral tradition for a long time. And we know what happens in oral tradition. We all played the telephone game when we were kids, and we also know the stories that our grandparents told us. And that's what's good about, by the way, this book Moonglow. It's all about grandfather talking to his grandson as he's dying, and the stories that come out are very different than the ones he had heard before. And it's a wonderful thing. So this is human nature to tell the story that way. So, all right, anybody have any other impressions? Sam?
Well, it prevents vendetta. What my wife and all these people out.
Oh, wow, sure.
They're not coming back to reclaim that land. When Israel became Israel, the Arabs left. Now what's the big thing about the Arabs? They want their land. They want the right to return.
Right, exactly.
And
Yes,
there
Marty?
is the Quranic exhortation, if you will, to kill all the infidels and take over. So they are justified pretty much like Joshua.
And yet, I've done some study of the Quran where there's texts in there that are very clear. I didn't bring them tonight, that say there needs to be respect for the Jews and the Christians because they also have a relationship with God. So there has been periods in Islamic history where there was great tolerance and respect for those who were of the other Abrahamic faiths. But those aren't the texts that ISIS quotes.
I'm just quoting chapter 2.
Okay.
In the Quran, you got to know how you're reading it. There's certain things that supersede what's already there.
Chapter 2 is
Same thing's true with our Torah and our Bible.
then you have the extremists, the extremists.
Right. I mean, yes, religious texts can be used for great good and also for great harm. And I think that in every religious faith you'll find cases of both. And I think that's why we have to continue to study and find these texts and find interpretations with which we can live and feel good about who we are.
And we're allowed to question, and we do have
Absolutely.
other rabbis that wrote commentaries and this rabbi said.
Yeah, we've done a lot of that in this
Yeah.
class. I brought a lot of this stuff to you.
Jewish religion is, I mean, we do that well.
Yeah, well, you remember that first text that someone looked at, I forget who it was, and said, oh, I can't believe we're reading this, all the Midrash, this one. That was you, Steve, right? Yeah, right. But that's our stuff too, you know, and it just shows that the questions that we have about our religion, our text, we're not the first ones to ask those questions. So it does us well to take a look at how it bothered them. Like, always look at Rashi, you know? Rashi usually asks the same questions, and sometimes he gives great answers. And his best answer, I think I told you for me, was once, it was a very difficult text in Deuteronomy, and we're sitting in class, and no one can understand. The teacher says, why don't we look at Rashi? And we read the same thing, and Rashi raised the same question, and Rashi said, Eneni Yodea, which means, I don't know. And that's when Rashi became my hero, because if someone like Rashi, who knew so much, could say, I don't know, we all can say, I don't know. So I may have told you I don't know a few times in these weeks, and I continue to do that.